Going back to hiring an employee, like hiring one of our AI agents. So you hire an employee and you want an employee to do a certain amount of tasks. Now imagine you hire a manager for that employee. And now you have a manager and you have two other employees. So one of the things that we are specializing in now is you can hire REI manager and you can hire REI employees. And, it's going back to the concept of AI hiring AI. So the paycheck still has to come from the human, but like if you employ our system, we actually have an AI that can manage its own AI, but also promote and demote the various employees and choose which ones should be dedicated to those tasks.
Most teams talk about AI agents. Very few run companies where most of the employees are actually agents. Today's guest is doing exactly that, and he's going to break down how to build agent systems that are actually reliable and not just a cool demo. Welcome to the Enhance AI Partners podcast, where we spotlight leaders re-engineering growth through people, process, and pragmatic AI. I'm Yohan Mejia, founder of Enhance AI Partners. Today, we're diving into reliable agent systems, not slides, not hype, but real agents doing real work inside companies. My guest today is Yuri Kaplan, co-founder of JumpPoint AI. JumpPoint is an early stage AI automation company where most of the staff are actually AI agents. They recently took first place out of over 120 companies at a major innovation competition, and they're piloting agents that can simulate a human's workflow inside messy legacy enterprise systems. And today we're going to talk about what reliability actually means for agent systems, how they think about safety and governance, and what it looks like to replace fragile glue, code, and integrations with agents that just do the work. So, Yuri, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Johan. Love to be here. Appreciate the kind intro there.
It's our pleasure. Now, let's start with JumpPoint itself so people know who you are and what you're building. So,
Yeah,
when someone outside of AI asks you, so what is JumpPoint really? How do you explain it in, like a short pitch deck?
yeah, for sure. So the one sentence answer is usually we help companies launch their AI workforce through either automated processes or real live AI agents.
It's amazing. Now, you mentioned you're a small core team and most of your employees are AI agents. And so tell us, what does that actually look like day to day?
Yeah, I think it's a lot like what Mark Benioff in that sense describes that a lot of the management is the management of AI agents. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, basically the layer of the executive team, the expertise is how can we leverage as much AI as possible, and it depends on your specific task set, of course. But if you're, executive of engineering, the focus is more on how can you leverage engineering AI agents, coding AI agents,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, as well as AI agents that help collaborate the vision with the other executive team members that might be not so technical. On the marketing side of things, of course, there's a lot of marketing AI agents, sales AI agents, you name it, right? But the whole idea behind it is how can you collaborate with the strength of AI between the various communication sources so that the
Mm-hmm.
departments can communicate together faster, easier, but also at the same time, how can you automate hopefully 90% of your tasks? So going back to, the delegation concept and Eisenhower matrix, if you will, of productivity,
Mm-hmm.
where you're always thinking of how much can you delegate, what can you eliminate because AI will take care of it altogether, how much do you need to potentially train AI to repeat this task and ultimately create your SOPs with it, and how much
Mm-hmm.
as a human is just still not replaceable, because that does exist. There's a lot that the human is
Yeah,
not replaceable today for.
100%. And could you share a few of the workflows or functions that these agents are currently handling right now?
Yeah, it depends, again, on the department,
Mm-hmm.
but we do have a lot of coding in place. So a lot of junior developer code, I would say, is being completed with AI agents today. Same with a lot of DevOps related activities. It was also now fully delegated to AI agents. Generally, a lot of the monitoring, marketing, sales, as well as a lot of the content generation to a certain degree. You do need some
Mm-hmm.
human in the middle there.
Yeah,
Although,
100%.
AI agents are actually really good at content generation, but you do need a lot of guides and rules.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I would say that's kind of the majority. Customer service another one, but I would say our customer service, and that doesn't mean that's necessarily the truth for everybody, but for us,
Mhm.
a lot of the customer service is more of an RPA flow versus necessarily AI agent. It's almost like an RPA with an LLM layer
I
versus
see.
true agentic AI that it really goes
Mhm.
off on its own.
That's amazing. And everyone listening, I feel like everyone would love to have that implemented in their team to make their lives easier. Now, most companies are still, dipping their toes in with a simple chatbot and maybe a couple of scripts. It feels like you guys went almost the opposite way. Small human team, lots of agents. What convinced you and your team that this agent first model was the right bet?
I mean, we are an AI company, so we have to drink our own Kool-Aid if we're gonna sell it, I think. So a lot of that is kind of important. Otherwise, we'd feel a little
Mhm.
fake. B, I mean, I've been in AI for a long time. Like even when it was kind of just starting out, it wasn't so popularized. I've built AI algorithms, AI companies that I've sold, and I think I was pretty close to it for a while now, and always has been curious. I'm part of a number of highly AI focused reading groups and just general communities. So I've always had my hand on the pulse in that sense. But also, I think that's two components to your question. One is, why are we adopting AI? And the second one is, why do we believe we can have such a small team adopting AI? And I would say there's two components to that. One is not too long ago, a few months back, there was an article by Y Combinator, where I forget which
Mhm.
one of their partners, but he mentioned that they believe soon there's going to be $100 billion company with 10 people, which is pretty insane when you think about that,
Yeah.
because that revenue per employee is like, holy crap. Like, you know,
You
yeah,
guys are
when you look
doing
at some
something
revenue,
good.
yeah, like when you look at some companies, like a lot of companies are really good now and they've been pushing the boundaries. You go all the way from like Costco, that's about 5 or 600,000, I think, per employee that their revenue is, to like some of the big techs that are now hitting about 2 million. You got Telegram, which is one of the best examples of hitting high
Yeah.
revenue targets with a very tight team. But nobody has yet reached that. And the thing is, it's Y Combinator. It's one thing when Sam Altman says, we're going to have a
Yeah.
unicorn one person team. Well, yeah, they're selling the stuff. Y Combinator, sure, they have a bunch of startups doing it, but they're a little bit outside of like they don't build their own models, right? They're just
Mhm.
speaking what they truly believe. So to them, I think I did definitely that resonated with me. The other component of it, and we've seen this, so the whole concept of AI trainers moving to AI tutors, if you're seeing like XAI shifting their workforce, laying off teams of trainers, shifting tutors, and
Mhm.
all of this, like the way that stuff is progressing, it's much the training of even the foundational models is becoming more and more focused on teaching versus annotating. And
Yeah.
DeepSeek was a great example where they achieved like a phenomenal task of competing with big players using techniques like relative policies and the ability to basically have AI agents almost train, and this whole concept of LLM as a judge, where you can
Mhm.
almost have LLMs fully trained within an unsupervised fashion. Seeing all of that happen, it's making me believe that if you had a collaborative AI workforce, it can be done. And we are seeing
Yeah.
some of this transformation within our own clients and who we're working with, specifically within the insurance space and the
Mhm.
AI agents we're building within the insurance space today. We already see huge lifts where we've saved thousands upon thousands of hours for some clients.
I can only imagine. And I think, I mean, insurance is one of those companies that has been the same for decades now. And I mean, from that point of view, adding one automation on their side, I feel like that just one automation makes them one see the capabilities, how much time they've saved, how much money they're saving, and then I feel like they go full force with everything else you offer. Now,
Yeah,
where do you think most companies are underestimating what agents can do right now?
I think there is a combination of underestimation and overestimation, to be honest.
Yes.
So, I mean, we can touch on the overestimation because that's a topic of its own. I think underestimation is it's the whole concept of you want to control. A good parallel would be an RPA versus an agentic, a true agentic agent going with guardrails.
Hmm.
I think a lot of agentic implementation today is here are little strung together agents that is almost like an LLM driven RPA versus a true agentic process that has weight classes. And a lot of that is through all the tools out there that exist today, where, if you wrap yourself around a lot of foundational APIs, like they don't expose their weights. So you're
Hmm.
tuning LLMs with like instructions and you're sort of affecting it, but that's not true, like agentic flow because it's not really learning. You're tuning it manually over and over and over. And then when
Yeah.
you get another set of problems, you still have to retune it. Now that could
Yeah.
work in certain use cases. I'm not, saying that's bad. And obviously it's working for a lot of people. But I wouldn't say I'm in my opinion, that's underestimating what agentic capabilities can truly do, which is,
100%.
again, going back to what DeepSeek did. Like, you can become almost fully unsupervised if you have proper agents distilling other agents, evaluating other agents.
Hmm.
There's a lot that you can do with it, where it reduces your workforce drastically, and more importantly, it increases the opportunity because, especially within a data heavy industry, a human mind simply cannot comprehend all the data
No,
points. So
100%.
therefore, your
Yeah.
decision is not going to be as effective as if you have a truly agentic process in place that can crack a few billion data points with a very like
Hmm.
low cost GPU, which is still going to cost you 100x cheaper than a really good employee. And now, of
Yeah.
course, you're going to need some sort of human level supervision in the middle. I don't think there's a single agent out there today that doesn't. Even when you look at some of the top agentic browsers or the top agentic models. Like there is always some supervision. Like I don't care what industry, I don't care like what task. The question is where you put those guardrails in, and that
Hmm.
goes more to the overestimating capabilities. Because if you don't have the guardrails in place and you overestimate
Yeah.
what an agent can do, there is a really big company. I'm not going to say the name, but it's been a couple times in the news this year with multi-million-dollar contract where it used AI to generate some of the reports that it charges millions of dollars for. And yeah, it got in a little bit of trouble there because I think there was some overestimation on someone in some
Yeah.
part of that process.
Yeah, and I feel like not only overestimation, but trust going overboard with the capabilities of that service. And I mean, that's actually perfect leeway to our next segment, where we talk about reliability and why it's risky, why AI can be really risky if you can't trust the agents. So when you say reliable agent systems, what does reliability actually mean to you? Is that accuracy, the guardrails, predictability? How would you define it?
Yeah, I would say that's like letting a 12-year-old drive without necessarily, and I'm not saying that in any sense of coming down on anybody trying to implement it, but just as a great
Hmm.
example, imagine you put a 12-year-old behind the wheel, they've never had a driving lesson, they don't know the rules of the road, and just letting them drive. I'm not saying that because of the people, I'm saying that because of the AI, even the top AI, sure, it can do some PhD level tests, but a lot of, if you look at Lee Kun or, Ilya Sutskever or like any of the bigger names,
Hmm.
they're all saying that the AI is still an infant.
Yeah.
One of the famous books, The Prediction Machines, that I really love by Ajay Agrawal, who I've had the pleasure of learning from, he looks
Well.
at it as we're at the age of electricity back in the beginning of the 19th century, where they were trying to figure out how
Yes.
do we use electricity in everything. There's going to be a
Hmm.
day where you're going to be like, where is life without electricity? Excuse me. And we're already progressing towards it. However,
Yeah.
we're not there, and like that's not my words, that's the words of like the real experts, the forefathers of the AI, and the people who live and breathe this every single day. Now, if we are at the beginning of that, how far can we really go? And also, what does that say about the AI? AI is, if it's an
Hmm.
infant, you need to explain to the infant, or even if it's a 12-year-old level, what are the rules of driving. And when I think about AI and the guardrails that I don't want to say impose, but from an ethical standpoint, we should in some capacity impose them. Otherwise, there's breach of ethics. And to me, breach of ethics is breach of security, breach of data, breach of
Yeah.
just general copywritten material. Like, there's a lot of forms of it, and we see lawsuits all
Hmm.
over the world because of it. Now, if we are to do that, then we need to put in those same rules. We need to give it a driving test. We need to give it maybe a
Yeah.
couple driving tests, make sure that it's good, and make sure that it knows the rules. And it's actually like in training, going back to safety nets. Now, if you're using an API wrapper, okay, like a lot of that is already set in the foundational model for you. But if you're using something that's a little bit more edgy, if you have your own GPU deployed, if you're doing your own training on sensitive data, if you're
Hmm.
synthesizing data and you're not sure where that synthesis is coming from, there is a certain amount of things like PII stripping and things like you should be taking care of, because it's just like the right ethical thing to do. But also because technically, if you're doing it for a company, that can get you in a lot of trouble. And having dealt with insurance, it's at the forefront of what we do. We always have to be very careful with a lot of these things. So it's
Hmm.
it's a focus. It's a huge focal point. Before this, I was doing AI in an advertising industry, same thing. So I think it's very important to put those rules in place. And when you're using open weights, you have promoting, you have demoting, so you can control this within your learning chain before things are trained and before they're out in the wild. But even when they're out in the wild, still, it doesn't mean in my opinion, you can just let go, because you have to make sure that the data that's flowing through is again being properly sanitized, if you will, both for your own
Hmm.
security, but also the security of your clients.
Now, if I was a founder or an operations leader listening, what are the first signs that an agent system is not reliable yet?
It depends. I mean, it depends. And sometimes, we see even large multi-billion-dollar companies let it slip through the cracks. So I
Hmm.
think I'm a huge fan of, first of all, distilling things.
Yeah.
So the distillation of agents helps reduce hallucinations. It also lowers your cost, frankly, if you properly,
Hmm.
load balancing everything. It also means that you can evaluate things much simpler. So instead of evaluating a giant chunk, you can evaluate little focal points of those agents and sub
Hmm.
agents, and it makes the evaluation process much easier. But I would say, our whole thing at Jump Point is, yeah, we have a bunch of tools that can help you speed up your workflows. But our main focal point is actually this AI workforce concept, where you could hire an employee the same that you would a human, but
Hmm.
you just hire an AI agent, and your hourly wage for that AI agent is different. So now, when you're thinking about it that way, is okay. So what do I do when I hire an employee? When I hire an employee, I do a bunch of interviews. So you look at who
Hmm.
am I going to hire, right? Then once you do, you have some sort of job description. You have training period. You have potentially SOPs you provide them to make sure that they know what they're
Yes.
doing. You have check-ins with that individual. And then you usually have a 3-month probation period where you might choose another one.
Hmm.
Now, outside of the probation period, although you can, draw a parallel there too potentially, everything is highly relevant, right? You should have an
Yeah.
SOP for this agent. You can try to make that SOP with another agent, but you should still have an
Hmm.
SOP. You should have a training period. Again, you could do what DeepSeek did, and you do the training with other agents as well, and they'll talk to each other and so on. But at the end of the day, I think that process doesn't change, because whether it's an AI employee or it's not, you should still be thinking about it in the same capacity of how you would hire an individual. Now, that's specifically
100%.
for AI employees. If you're thinking of wrappers around foundational models, a lot of that is already set for you. So I would say the
Hmm.
guardrails would just be making sure that your output is stripped of PII when it's necessary. Your copywritten material has a watermark if that's the case and you're in the media industry. So whatever it is, like in the advertising industry, a lot of AI UGC content these days, like you have to make sure that there's some And we see a lot of companies that do this, is that they specifically
Hmm.
are trained on copyright free material or public domain, or they own the licensing for it. There's a big company doing music out of Europe that does that. So either you're doing that if it goes on social media in combination with a proper ad disclosure, or you find a different way to do it, right? But I think it
Hmm.
really depends industry specific, but the main thing goes back to that ethical standard, like making sure that people's data is secure, making sure that people's usage rights are secure, copyright
Yeah.
rights, brands, and all of that, because it means a lot for brands, and that can really bite you in the rear end, so to speak. So
And I think your way of comparing an AI agent to hiring someone is actually a very good way to put it, and it gives a founder, a CEO, or anyone listening like steps that we can take that are simple, but that are gonna make it or break your AI agent. So thank you for sharing that. I've never thought about it that way. Of course, it doesn't really take 3 months, like you said, but we still have to go through that process of making sure that the employee knows what he's doing, knows what not to do, and knows what his mission is at the end of why he was brought to the team. So I think that's a very, very valuable insight. Now, what's one reliability mistake you see teams making over and over when they move from a demo to actually the production part of things?
yeah, I mean, it depends, and it depends again on the deployment process too. Like with larger enterprise versus smaller enterprise, you might have different stepping stones. So I would say the main thing in terms of just expecting too much of it is not like when you're doing a demo,
Hmm.
you're in a much more contained environment. And I think this is actually the advantage of working or being a larger enterprise versus smaller companies, is that with smaller companies, you almost move from this demo environment where you're maybe using a few users, it's highly closed, the usage is small. It's kind
Hmm.
of, it's a very limited sample of data, it's a limited sample of usage, and it's limited QA in some capacity. So if you didn't account for certain guardrails, certain things that can go off the chain, and a lot of that is proper monitoring in place during the demo stage,
Yeah.
by which you then transfer obviously to production. But at the same time, when you move to production, you kind of go from demo to production with a smaller company. With an enterprise company, you don't do that. You go from, a demo to a pilot to a larger pilot to a larger pilot. So it's kind of like you don't unleash it on the entire company off the bat. So they do have a
Hmm.
chance to, selling to a large enterprise is very much the Toyota manufacturing system in some capacity, where you have all this like,
Yeah.
and this is what Scrum came back from, right? Like, so if you read the book by the guy who made Scrum, Jeff Sutherland,
Hmm.
he talks about it. Like he came up with the concept of Scrum from Toyota manufacturing systems, some robotics, and him being a pilot in the war. So he took the three concepts, he put it together in Scrum, and the Toyota manufacturing system was a huge component from that. The idea behind the fact that if something goes off the rails, we stop it right there and then before more bad stuff can happen. So the
Hmm.
advantage of being able to deploy almost like a multi-level POC, if you will, to
Hmm.
multi-level pilot kind of idea is very powerful in that sense, because again, before you go through the entire company, you can stop things before they get too bad, if there is anything bad in there. And the reason Toyota manufacturing system came up with this is because clearly bad things did happen. So I mean, how many engineers do we have, how many cars do they output? Like, if a company that is that powerful and that smart and that talented and that successful has that within their manufacturing process, the reality is that any process that can potentially happen in. So I think, yeah, you're going to put a lot of guardrails in place, but it's also how can I create a rollout with enough supervision across every step of that rollout, so that if something does go wrong, we can stop it right there and then before that issue potentially spreads. And that can be
Hmm.
adopted. I know I keep saying manufacturing, but like it doesn't actually matter. This can be adopted to anything. If we think about it, a lot of agentic flows today are a wrapper around an RPA. Well, robotic
Yeah.
process automation, like, right, like manufacturing. So at the end of the day, the flows are comparable. The technology is different.
Well, that's a lot of really good insights that we could take back. Anyone trying to do AI, please listen to what you were saying. You will be saved from biting back or firing him back and then just not doing what you actually wanted to do. Now, where do humans still sit in the loop, in your opinion, and where are you comfortable letting agents run fully unattended?
Well, I mean, everywhere, I think, definitely within the purchasing process, because I mean,
Hmm.
AI agents can't buy AI agents yet. That'll be interesting when they can. But right now, I think a lot. There is, even again, the top models, even DeepSeek, which is a great example of a model that is not as reliant on humans as some other ones. Let's put it that way, right? Um, there's still a lot of human supervision that's necessary, and
Hmm.
AI is quite far from being fully unsupervised. Whether it's because of regulation or technology, again, when you listen to some of the top people, they are saying that even LLM within itself is reaching a bit of a peak. True AI agents aren't just LLM. In my opinion, it's a combination of various MLAI technologies that work
Yeah.
together within a weighted system, and certain processes which can be given by humans, AI, or combination of both. Like if I was to
Hmm.
summarize my opinion on what a good agentic process is. Now, when you're thinking about that, the human has to be there within implementation, within supervision. There has to be certain safety checks. It depends on how regulated your system is, of course. But let's take something as simple as Sora 2, right? Like human is triggering Sora 2. It doesn't just go off on itself. So it's triggering, like a
Hmm.
human is triggering the process. Human puts in the human creativity. Even if a human goes in and asks, how do I prompt Sora 2 from GPT? Like there is a level of creativity that goes, that initial spark that goes into that creativity.
Yeah. It's
Human verifies what comes out, sometimes refines
mhm,
what comes out. So we sell to enterprise, it's that, but just 100x, right? And the
mhm.
steps are all over the place. But even as something as I want to create a cameo video using Sora 2, which apparently cameo is actually a trademarked word, so that's an interesting article to take a look at. But let's say you want to create any Sora 2 video. It doesn't, it doesn't do it by itself, right? So
Yeah.
no matter what, you're basically, if I think about it, you're going to have the spark of creativity that comes from the human of what needs to be done. You're going to have some sort of SOP. Make me a video where
Mhm.
an elephant looks like a cucumber. That's an SOP. Like it's a simple SOP, but that's an SOP. And you're going to have an evaluator that checks what did AI come up with, and which
Mhm.
potentially enters a reevaluation loop because you're looping it all over again. Like it enters a loop. Basically, going back to that manufacturing system. No, the car didn't come out good. Do it again.
Mhm.
Fix XYZ. So I think that is going to be very consistent. Now, at some point, you're going to be able to put some of these circles of revision QA process, if you will, on content. You're able to create AI agent evaluators that actually do part of this process for you. But
Mhm.
that would only happen once the human has enough confidence where, look, this thing has just been right so many times. And the parallel of the specific workflow is just so, the variance of it is so little that I am 100% confident that you don't need a human supervision. And then
Yeah.
depending on the steps, that's the judgment of an organization or AI consultants or AI companies, like ourselves or like ourselves who work with companies to
Mhm.
basically help make sure, like, okay, you're ready to progress to less human or you're not. And I
Yeah.
think that's why it is a collaborative environment. We even work with large enterprise companies that have their entire AI departments, and they still work with us because nobody can be a specialist at everything. And you do need human supervision,
100%.
and you do need, outside help and outside opinions. And sometimes that external unbiased opinion is actually very important because
Mhm.
you don't want somebody who has a lot of skin in the game trying to rush things either. So
Yeah.
sometimes an external unbiased opinion is very important as well.
And you mentioned evaluation. how do you measure success for an AI agent? Do you measure it by how successful it is per task, per workflow, or just as a general outcome for the business? What would you say is the metric that you most are interested in?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I think everything should go from business goals backwards, right?
Yeah.
And the business goals, in my opinion, is the numbers. So you can look at two different numbers, like either growth or operational. I mean, there's a lot of numbers within that, but at the end of the day, it either reduces your costs or it increases your
Hmm.
sales, or hopefully it does both, right? That can be achieved through operational efficiency, and that can be achieved through additional data intelligence, or
Hmm.
both. And beyond that, another concept to look at, and it goes back to the ethics, because a lot of data ethics and AI ethics are rooted in something that can also be a legal liability. And legal liability is a potential risk. Pending time and insurance, risk is something we work with quite a bit. So risk is another component that people often don't think about. People often
Yeah.
try to do like either operational efficiency or growth efficiency, sometimes both. Larger
Hmm.
enterprise always think about risk, but I think a lot of the smaller companies, SMBs in particular, they almost don't care about the risk because it's like, well, we'll fly under the radar, which
Hmm.
could be true, but it's probably not something you want to mess with because there are
Yeah.
also things like cybersecurity risks. Like it doesn't necessarily just end at like, oh, we're not going to get sued because we're not big enough or something. Like that's not a good way to think.
Hmm.
So I think the combination of those. Now, if you're thinking back from evaluation of technical perspectives, then okay, so how do we measure the total output completion? So let's say some of our AI agents that go and they actually complete human-based tasks. So we can evaluate exactly how long a human takes to do this task and how long our process takes to do this task.
Hmm.
And basically, we can measure the hours saved by our AI agent in return
Hmm.
for the wage of that AI agent, if you will, right? So it gives you a direct correlation of why people hire our AI agents versus human employees
Hmm.
for those that it designated, tasks or occupations, if you will. That's one example. From another example is data. So data can either reduce risk or data can increase growth, whether it's sales,
Hmm.
marketing, whatever. It can potentially, yeah, provide a lot of other insights. But generally, if you think, you ask the five whys, like, why do I care about these insights? Well, it's either more dollars or less spend, right? Like, or less spend
Yeah.
on risk and legal things. So that data, if it reduces liability, depending
Hmm.
on your system, like in insurance, for example, you will eventually know that for the year you had less claims. Like your loss ratio, it's called, is
Hmm.
it has improved. So that's a clear metric that we can do. Now that's specific to certain data that's within the claims area.
Hmm.
For sales, it's like, okay, what is your conversion? Or you can split that into MQLs and SQLs, which, MQLs, okay, how many leads does the sales team get? And how many of those deals are actually good leads?
Yeah.
That's usually like the two MQL metrics that we really love. And then the SQL is ultimately, yeah, conversion, but also the size of the contract and renewal rate of the contract and so on too.
Hmm.
Obviously the renewal takes a little bit longer, but it also depends on the company. And now for the legal risk, I think a lot of the safety guards in terms of there's scores, first of all, and there's actually rating systems that you can use for some of that, quite a bit of them. But also, that does involve a lot more human. At least that's where we use the most human, because say we have a lot of data synthesizers, we do want to make sure that there's no PII within the synthesization process, and like that does require human because we don't want to trust another AI that like all the data, yes, has been indeed stripped. Like you take a sample of the size, of course, like we
Hmm.
have hundreds of thousands of documents flow through our system monthly, so like you can't do all of that human, but you take a sample size and you randomize those sample size across your production system. And if you properly randomize it, which by the way AI can do for you, or you can even write a
Hmm.
regular algo for that, and you randomize properly across your production system, random samples of dedicated sample sizes, like your regular statistical analysis, basically, right? And everything looks proper, then usually that's when we feel like we're confident enough to put it to the next level of production.
I mean, thank you for the insights. And last time we spoke, you mentioned a new product you guys launched around simulating people's workflows in enterprise systems, which is where reliability really gets stress tested. So one of the coolest things you shared was that new capability that was launched. So for people hearing that for the first time, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, basically, it's like going back to hiring an employee, like hiring one of our AI agents. So you hire an employee and you want an employee to do a certain amount of tasks. Now, imagine you hire a manager for that employee. And now you have a manager and you have two other employees. So one of the things that we are specializing in now is you can hire REI manager and you can hire REI employees. And, it's going back to the concept of AI hiring AI.
Mhm.
So the paycheck still has to come from the human, but like if you employ our system, we actually have an AI that can manage its own AI, but also promote and demote the various employees and choose which ones should be dedicated to those
Mhm.
tasks. So I think that's a relatively new concept, I would say. I haven't heard too many companies that are employing this, at least production. I haven't heard of really any that have this specific approach. There's a lot of AI
Mhm.
agents, but they're dedicated to a task or a specialty. There's a lot of distillation in place. So it's either here, it's either there, but it's not, people. Obviously, there's AI agent orchestration. This is an AI agent orchestration. The orchestration still happens within the AI agent itself. This is literally AI agents managing other AI agents with provided SOPs. Now, the beautiful thing about it is now it can act as a lot of different employees. So you could have, for example, one of our clients, they have their own AI executive assistant that manages
Mhm.
an account executive and that manages a content marketer and that manages a
Yeah.
customer service rep. So now, instead of the human actually managing those three, you basically delegate your chain of command to your executive assistant that manages the other
Mhm.
three agents. So it's almost like now you're extrapolating one step even further. And within themselves, there's distilled orchestration because you need that for
Mhm.
accuracy. Like if you have one, like you need distillation within something like customer service rep, because otherwise, the data flow could be, you could have hallucinations, you could have all kind of, you need a lot of layers in place for a customer service agent
Mhm.
without, like, unless you want to have hallucinations. There's actually a company out of London, also very public in the news, that went a little too heavy on customer service with AI. There's a lot of bad stuff in the news with them, so they dialed it back and rehired something like 1,000 people because of it. So I think again, that's the example of overestimation. So
Yeah.
part of overestimation is offsetting it with distillation. So I think that's very, very important for sure. That's kind of the new thing. We're pretty new in the market with it. It's already picking up very good. It's moving to the larger part of our business very fast. So we're super pumped about spreading this joy to more and more companies. And if anybody's interested, feel free to email me.
Yeah, we'll make sure to add everything below so that they could for sure talk to you and see how Jump Point can help everyone. And at a high level, no client names, no sensitive details. Can you walk us through what it looks like for one of these agents to simulate a person's workflow inside a big, messy system, maybe even old?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It depends. So, first of all, if it's a cloud base, it's much easier. We do on
Mhm.
premise as well, but that involves usually at least a part of IT, especially if you're, like, generally, if you're more than 10 people company, you have some sort of IT shop. So there's a little bit of coordination there. But what we're trying to do is make it as low touch as possible. So usually you'd hop on a call with us. We would understand your needs. Either you have an SOP in place or we develop one for you after that initial consultation. And so it's all depending for you, depending on your budget, depending on your desires. depending on the size of your company, obviously. Then again, depending on the size of your company, usually that follows several meetings with other team members. With smaller companies, usually there's not that many more meetings. With some of the other companies we've had, sometimes it's as many as 10, 20 team members by the time we proceed to
Oh,
the
wow.
proof of concept. But so then at some point we do the proof of concept, and the idea of proof of concept, we figure out the best SOW that works for you. You know, we're at that point under all the right contractual obligations, and we proceed to basically doing this pilot within your data system within a very controlled output environment, so you can
Mm-hmm.
feel safe about everything. And once we proceed with that and you feel everything is good, we can actually start deploying it to, again, depending on your system, to a specific set of your either departments, clusters. If it's a geolocated office, or, one of the clients we work with in the manufacturing space, for example, they wanted to do one factory. So it all really depends on your use case. But at the end of the day, the whole point is that it's secure, it's tactical. You're able to evaluate every step before your rollout. And in
Mm-hmm.
terms of who and what, I specifically left that part out because we're actually extremely agnostic. I did drop some names in terms of the AI agents that we develop as well as we use
Mm-hmm.
internally. But in a world where we live, the truth is, this is working so fast that within 2 months we're going to have 10, 20 more. So I'd rather keep that open,
Mm-hmm.
because keeping it open is just the realistic world we live in. This time next year we could have hundreds of specialized AI agents doing any task you want. So I think this is the realistic point of view. The main thing is that you work with someone that does it safe and that has a tactical approach to it, and that it's more than just a wrapper. It's integrated into your systems. That doesn't necessarily mean huge IT approvals always, by the way. There's all
Yeah.
kinds of things that they do, that we do, that we're able to, I don't want to say bypass IT, but just make certain IT requirements unnecessary,
Mm-hmm.
because, like, not everything always has to be integrated. People think today, still, I think there's a lot of people stuck in this world of, we need an API integration, we need to integrate, I need to authenticate with my accounts. That's not necessarily true. There is
Mm-hmm.
all kind of ways. Like, think about it this way: if you hired an executive assistant, are you giving them your password? Are you giving them an API to some database? You're not. So you
Exactly.
don't need to do it for our AI agents either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are some things you would need to do, but you don't need to give your password necessarily. And you don't need to give, the keys to the castle necessarily either. So, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, I think, our strength, is to make sure that we really do behave as just a digital twin of that executive assistant, that employee. And we are not about replacing people, right? I specifically say production and executive assistant and all these things, specifically because we still believe the human is necessary. Our goal is to empower humans with their own executive assistants. And this way, you do what you love and you can offset everything to your executive assistant. You're the one who is responsible for this executive assistant, and you're the one who ultimately is the expert in this executive assistant. We just give you the
100%.
framework, the tools, the ability, the AI agent, that can perform all these tasks on your behalf.
I mean, this is powerful stuff, and but it also at the same time it is kind of scary if you're a CIO thinking about an agent pressing buttons in a production system. So, can you give us some specific guardrails or safety mechanisms that you put in place so a company can feel comfortable deploying the tech on their side?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, pressing buttons is a great example. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't necessarily usually need to press buttons, right? Like, there are submission buttons. That doesn't need to be done until there is a proper simulation that is approved in place.
I
We have a
see.
very extensive simulation process. Now, extraction of data needs to happen, otherwise it doesn't feel real. But again, extraction of data, as long as it's stored ethically and there's proper NDAs in place, it doesn't damage your reputation or company in any way whatsoever. So the whole part of getting access to the system is divided into two components. One is, okay, let's provide the simulation environment for you. And then once it's real, that's when the pressing buttons really, really happens. And that's when the submission
Mm-hmm.
happens. And the live email happens and all of that. But all of those things really don't need to happen live off the bat. So
Pretty cool stuff that you guys are building. And thank you for sharing, I mean, the examples and guardrails that you guys are using on your side. Now, from a systems point of view, what does a good agent architecture look like to you in simple terms?
yeah, I mean, it really depends. I think again, something that has a um, weighted factors that can improve over time that reduces first of all the cost of delivery of the product, but also reduces the overall overhead of human in the loop.
Yeah.
So that's critical. I would say the rest of it, it really depends on a case by case. I,
Hmm.
I know that I said APIs aren't always needed, but like the reality is sometimes you do need an MCP, sometimes you do need to leverage an ADK just because it's faster and easier to integrate into certain infrastructures. So I would say it's really case by case basis. I would say the main thing is that you have something that can learn and improve over time with minimal human supervision, but you always have
Hmm.
some human supervision in the right places.
And where have you seen multi-agent setups actually help? And where do you think they are just too chaotic or too big to handle?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the role.
Mm.
It's like obviously if you're trying to, replace full components of a department, you're going to need to have multiple agents. If you're trying to
100%.
just do, let's say you're trying to do a content marketing writer, well, that can really be a single agent that's tailored within your specific, guidelines.
Hmm.
And now imagine you're a newer company that doesn't have the guidelines in place. You might need two agents. You might need an agent that actually creates those guidelines and the second one that actually executes those guidelines. So I think it depends on your size and your business, your maturity level, and ultimately the task that you're trying to delegate. But again,
Hmm.
thinking of it as a role, and would you hire one human to do this or multiple humans? And if one human, is this human wearing one hat or multiple hats? And a good way to think about it is if you're, a large enterprise, usually humans wear much less hats. Like a startup, you're going to be wearing 10, 20. So that's if you're lucky. So I think it really depends on all those things because of that. But really, I would say, yeah, it's people, but it's also the hats. And the hats
Hmm.
is actually even probably a better way of thinking about it because even within
Yeah.
large corporations, sometimes people wear multiple hats. That's why they progress forward usually, right?
Hmm.
So because they are good at doing a lot of things, and then they move up in the company. So I'm not saying people don't move up in the company if they wear one hat. That happens too. But at the end of the day, yeah, I think a good way of thinking an agent is like each hat deserves an agent type deal. In my
Hmm.
opinion, I'm not saying everybody should follow that, but that's my opinion.
And how do you test systems, agent systems in the background so they don't, quietly blow up? And when you're testing, what kinds of failure modes are you specifically looking for before rolling it out to a client?
Yeah, again, I don't want to get too in depth on this beyond
Hmm.
like what we've touched on, to be honest. But I would, revert back to the fact that it's, first of all, setting up good SOP. And SOP is no different than setting KPIs for an employee. Like, okay, what is your goal to achieve in the next 3 months, right?
Hmm.
Now, of course, the iteration cycle is much, much faster with our AI agents, but, we're talking, days to weeks, depending on the type of AI agent that you want to use and then depending on the support from the company, of course. But it's making sure that those KPIs that need to be met are met. It's make sure that depending on the specific environment, those rules that should be followed for safety and risk. A great example is PII stripping are
Hmm.
followed. It's demo to simulation to production. So we have a pretty lengthy process before a full production, but it also varies team by team. It varies company by company. So
And when something actually goes wrong, how do you tell if it was the model, the SOP, the prompt, the workflow, or the surrounding system? How do you trace that back?
yeah, that's interesting that you're saying that. So earlier, way earlier, this was well over a year ago now, actually, probably near in 2 years, we had a process that was reviewing insurance documents. And basically, there's this thing within the insurance industry that you generate a certificate of insurance
Hmm.
and the certificate of insurance is to prove that you have insurance coverage for a third party. Let's say you're going to a conference,
See.
they want a proof of insurance that if there's a fire, you're covered, there's no liability. Like, as an example, or a big one is in the construction industry, right? Like you're a contractor, you need to have insurance that if something goes wrong, everything is covered, and you don't, their insurance is basically also covered and everything is good. So this certificate of insurance, depending on the complexity of it, can take, 5 to 20 minutes potentially to generate. We generate it within seconds. And earlier, when we were able to do this, we were still keeping quite a bit of human in the loop during the first phases of creating this technology. And I remember there was this one breakthrough moment for this technology is that we had a human review it and they're like, oh, this thing is wrong. And then we dove deeper and we realized the human was wrong. The AI was right. And because it was on page, I think like 170 or 200 or something, there was this little clause, and our AI agent caught it, and the human didn't read that far. So we basically had a secondary evaluation process, right? So when our AI agent errors out, let's say, during one of these trial phases where we're training it,
Mhm.
we always ask why. And either that why helps us change our weights, improve our systems, or sometimes it actually is a great case study that we can take back to the client saying, well, actually, we really appreciate your feedback. However,
Mhm.
here's, why our AI agent follow this. Would you say that this is a correct instance and reaction by the AI agent or incorrect? And in this specific scenario, it was a correct reaction by the agent. So I
Mhm.
think, I am a believer that there are tasks where AI agents are going to be superior to humans. And
Yeah.
something that reviewing a 200-page document where you have to look at a single line and that supersedes everything else in the document within that specific area. That is actually something that AI is much better at doing. So,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, so hopefully that answers your question.
No, it did. And I mean, you've been building AI systems across different industries for years, not just at Jump Point. So let's pull on that thread a bit. So you've done AI in marketing, user generated content, different departments and industries, and now deep in automation and agents. What patterns do you see, that are the same no matter where you deploy AI?
Yeah, I think one of them is going back to what I was saying, like whether it's a workflow automation and an SOP, or I'm going to prompt Sora 2 to make a nice video for me. Like there is a pattern, like at the end of the day,
Mhm.
like there is that creative spark, right? So I touched on that. I think the other component is when is an AI agent needed? And I would say AI agent is needed in the beginning and then in after, like yes, it's needed throughout, but it's like when you're a small team, it's really hard to get ahead because you're struggling to get ahead of others. You might not have the resources yet, and it's much cheaper to hire one of our AI agents than to actually go and try to build your own or go and trying to hire an employee for those specific potentially redundant tasks. The other part is data intelligence, and this is less so relevant usually to the smaller companies, but it's very relevant to larger companies or more complex processes. You mentioned, within the advertising industry and the AI that I built. So one of them was that we were automating user-generated content for large, CPG brands, and part of it was automating a valuation score for every potential consumer who could post about them. So they would have personalized directions on how to pose best, and in exchange, they would receive
Mhm.
like a certain gift, money, discounts, and so on. But B is also understanding what kind of gift should they receive based on the strength of profile that delivers back to that CPG company. The amount of factors that we were crunching on that, it was quite insane. So like a human would not really be able to do it because we would take look at entire feeds of regular consumers, not
Mhm.
necessarily influencers who have all of this like ready to go for people, by regular everyday consumers, all of their engagement, understanding, sentiments across comments, likes. You're talking about, 200 different factors and some of them with 1,000 points deep. Like a human
Wow.
wouldn't be able to do that effectively, especially when, in exchange, if there's 200 followers, you can
Mhm.
only offer so much in return. So if you're offering, you're maybe getting a sale and then, you're offering some discount on top, or maybe you're getting a few sales from this individual. Like you can't hire a person reviewing one by one. So it just like is impossible, right? So
Yeah.
I think for quite a long time now, the catalyst within implementing AI is the business model. So
Hmm.
the fact that AI makes certain things so cost effective that now you can, based on your own business's model, and whatever your objectives are, be able to leverage this to going back to those points, either grow your sales, reduce your operating costs. It's
Hmm.
all of a sudden makes sense. Again, as an SMB, you're not going to invest time in building your own AI agents, not true AI
Yeah.
agents. If
No
you
way.
want to create a custom GPT on GPT, sure you can. That's not quite the same, right?
Yeah.
But and I'm not saying you shouldn't. Like, to be honest, if that's all you can afford, go ahead. Like, build a GPT on ChatGPT. It's very
Yeah.
powerful. Like, tailor it to your brand. I'm not talking like shit about it at all. I know. Sorry, I was trying not to say, but yeah, I think it's all dependent on your business model, right? And whatever you can afford.
100%.
So there's a lot of critical aspects that you can improve. And usually, again, if you're thinking about it like, man, I'm overwhelmed, or I don't have enough data, or I just want to grow faster, and
Hmm.
that's your objective, then AI is the right place to do it.
And from your previous experience in marketing UGC company, what's one valuable lesson that you've carried directly into your approach at Jump Point today?
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit. It's interesting because when I started my previous AI company, AI was very
Hmm.
different. I would say it wasn't even so much AI, it was all ML, and then it transitioned to more AI, right? Like, now, GPT made transformers popular, even though they've been around quite a while, actually, right? Like, it
Yeah.
dates back to over a decade now. So I think there is a time and a place for each technology, is what I learned, right? Like, timing is
Hmm.
critical. So I think right now the timing is well positioned for LLM technology, even though that
Yeah.
majority, like, especially if it's an enterprise level system, especially if you're
Hmm.
crunching a lot of data, or you're trying to transfer one form of data into another form of data, you could use LLM in parts of it, but if you're entirely reliant on LLM within that entire process, you're almost surely going to hallucinate. You're going to need other
Yeah.
technologies in place, not LLMs. But that said,
Hmm.
because LLMs are so popular to write a poem, or write your email, and you got diffusion technologies working on Sora 2, like all of those, right? Which people, because it's ChatGPT, like I've heard people say, Sora 2 is an LLM. It's like, it's diffusion. It's
Mm.
not quite the same, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's the same company, sure. But so what I'm trying to get at is like, there is already mixture behind that, but everybody's like LLM, 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 because it's so in the media. Even though that, like, a
Hmm.
lot of technology for prediction of data, for recommendations, for transference of data that I mentioned, like, you don't even want to use an LLM sometimes at all, and sometimes a little bit, if it's unstructured. We are, I think, on the precipice of being, there's two things that are happening, right? And you see this with OpenAI's new device that, so everybody's super excited. What is their device going to be? And one of the
Hmm.
components is like, okay, well, if we're really miniaturizing technology to this capacity, we're going to need to fit a model on this, which means, and you've already seen this, you've got a 20 billion parameter open weighted open AI model on the market that specializes in coding, and it's been in the
Yeah.
market a couple months now. So everything is going smaller, but I think also a component of that is that the timing of technology is changing, where within the next few years we're going to see a new revolution, and you see that with
100%.
Yan Li Kun, or you see that with a number of the bigger players. Even Thinking Machines by Mira Murati, like, is working on
Hmm.
things that are going beyond just your traditional LLM. And I don't want to play down LLMs, but I think for us to grow, and again, this is the opinion of the forefathers of AI, to really grow within AGI and like improved AI, we are going to have to get beyond LLMs, or
100%. Yeah.
SLMs, like smaller language models, right? I think it's exciting what's going to happen. But going back, to your question, is always catching that timing of the adoption of technology, which is again
Hmm.
why you don't necessarily want to invest in a lot of infrastructure building it yourself. You want to invest in the right people who are always keeping the most relevant technology at the forefront of their
Yeah.
deliverables. Because otherwise, you're going to build it all, waste potentially millions of dollars, or if you're a smaller company, maybe thousands of dollars, depending what it is. Unless it is a custom GPT that you built with your, GPT Pro account for $200 a month, then it is. You are going to potentially blow through money, and unnecessarily so, because we see how fast things are progressing. Um,
Exactly.
Generative AI, man, like a year ago, you try and make a video, now you make a video, right?
Impossible.
Like, great example. That's just one sliver of the technology that's out there. So I think trying to build your own, like, we don't build any foundational models. Like, why in the heck
Hmm.
would we,
Yeah.
but of course we have our own GPUs, we have our own models, we have our weights, like we have all of that. But the reality is, there very few companies actually build their own foundational models. Even DeepSeek distilled Quen in some capacity, right? And then, had additional training and all that. But like,
Hmm.
I think it's just the fact that I think having that approach is very important in terms of timing and AI adoption. And it's always been true, like as long as I've been AI, that for the majority of companies, that's the best way, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, and I mean, it's something that I feel like a lot of people tried building their own AI systems in house, but then it takes you, I don't know, 3 6 months building it, millions of dollars invested, and then by the time you're done, there's already a solution that's probably way better than yours that some other company created. So, I mean, you've got a really good point right there, where what we see today and what we'll see in 2 weeks, it'll be completely different. And let's not even think about 6 months from now. And I feel like it is growing to a point where, yeah, I mean, we're getting AI agents for almost anything. But let's dial it back, and if a founder is listening and thinking, we want agents in our company, but we don't want a science experiment. What's your advice on, where he should start and what to avoid so that they have a pleasurable experience with AI agents?
Yeah, again, I think staying clear of just thinking, oh, I'm gonna like. There is a difference in, if the people listening, aren't aware with this term, like foundational models are like your main models, like the big names you
Hmm.
hear. But that said, you can distill those models into, more hyper agents where certain are open weighted, certain are not. Like a great example is a GPT-5, right? Or versus they have a new model which is open weight that you can put it. They have like 120 billion
Hmm.
parameter, which is really good, 20 billion parameter, because a lot of companies, especially DeepSeek, were releasing these open weighted, which means you can train it. And then other people, realized across the world that, damn, we need to do this too. So they started doing it. I think that is much more smarter, first of all. But at the same time, a person might come and think about it as like, well, okay, so GPT, same technology. I have 120 billion, but that 120B, like you're going to need to have a pretty damn good GPU to really make it work, especially at scale. Yeah, like, there's quantizing for various things and all of that, but like, and a lot of that, especially if you're, with Google, they're very good at supporting you with some of that. But
Hmm.
I'm not saying other providers aren't, but Google does have really, really good support. I love them. We're a Google shop, and the kind of thinking is like, oh, bigger is better, but not necessarily, because it's one thing when you have a model at the tip of your hand and you're like, I want
Hmm.
any answer all the time. But if you have a very specific thing that you're trying to hire an employee for, like, let's put this into perspective. Would you hire a salesperson who also has to be good at finance, but is also going to make your brand assets, and is also, gonna, like, you don't need that. Like, you need somebody who's good at
Yeah.
freaking sales. Like, and I think thinking about that in AI agents is going to save you a lot of money, because then you start thinking, it's like, hey, okay, so like, why don't I just get to 20B? And I made
Hmm.
sure that everything is good and in place. I'm going to save a fortune on my GPUs and, all kinds of other things, because like larger models don't necessarily, move this fast. Like, there's all kinds of other factors in place. So I think thinking about it more as like, oh, how small can a model be to complete this task with a very high accuracy is a really good way to
Mhm.
approach it. And then going back to finding your AI agent providers, if you don't want to build your own, a lot of it is thinking, how can I uh, break down all the tasks I need instead of just thinking, you know what, I need a chief growth officer. Well, like, okay, why?
Mhm.
Why do you need a chief growth officer? Do you really need a CGO AI agent? Or do you need a really good sales AI agent and a really good marketing AI agent and a really good content writer? And and it might make much more sense because even if it costs a little bit more, like one agent versus three agents, at the end of the day,
Mhm.
the cost for AI agents is becoming so minimal, especially if you're not trying to build them, but you're just hiring the ones like out of the box, or you're tuning them on your own systems. If you're a larger enterprise, then you're going to have much more accurate data, and at the end, it's actually going to be
100%.
cheaper, surprisingly. Especially if you're an enterprise who needs all this stuff private in your own thing
Mhm.
versus like a shared server. So yeah, I would say that's some thinking, but there's a lot, right? Like that's why Enhance AI partners and Jump Point exist, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it.
100%. So if you have any more questions, please let us know. Happy to help. Now, let's go over to the quick lightning round. Where we'll go through. I'll add one more question. Nothing crazy. I just like asking for a recommended book.
Sure.
So let's start with the first one. What's the most overrated thing people say about AI agents right now?
That they can do anything, especially browsers. There is, I'm not going to name names, but there's the popular browsers by the big foundational makers. And the people are like Google Chrome killer. That's always interesting to me because technically all of those new AI browsers sit on Chromium, which is, the technology behind Chrome.
That's so funny.
Yeah, sure, kill it. But for now, it's sitting on the same
Try.
platform. So at least at the moment, I'm not saying that's not going to change. But I'm not familiar with like a top of the media, AI browser today that doesn't actually sit underlining the same technology as Chrome, but it has an agentic layer on top. And the thing is,
Mhm.
it's far from killing it, in my opinion. I remember when OpenAI came out, too, people were arguing that it's going to kill Google. Let's say Google's over. And, I had a couple discussions with people where I disagreed with that. We recently saw
Mhm.
how Google's stock moved up. So I think it's going to keep moving up. You see certain
Yeah.
things like, Warren Buffett's investment in Google and so on that provide those signals. So I think, this overrating of like hype, versus
Mhm.
who has the infrastructure to support it necessarily. And at the same time, the ability that an AI agent can do absolutely anything on full autopilot today. I think
Yeah.
that's where
So.
it's trying to head, but we're not there.
Mhm.
And if you're, a human doing that, that's cool. Like if you're a regular employee doing that, even potentially, your job at risk. But you cannot do that as a company. Like you do
Yeah.
need to work with either a consultant or somebody else, or like hire your own experts internally that like are focused just on this and they know this domain.
Mhm.
Because otherwise, there's a huge risk. Like that's the reality today. It's just not there. You need guardrails in place. So I think that's very critical for anyone building a company that uses AI.
Now, second question. What's the most underrated place to use an agent inside a traditional company?
Underrated, huh? That's a good question, man. Underrated. I mean, I think it depends what is a traditional company, right? Let's say we use two spectrums. One is a consultancy, another one is a SaaS, because those are
Mhm.
kind of like spectrum-ish. Like you got CPGs on top of it, right? But like, it's different. One is highly service oriented. They might use some tools. One is hopefully product-led growth. Most SaaS is. Sometimes not always, but at the very least, even if you have direct sales, there is some PLG in there.
Mhm.
So I think monitoring everything, like even with a consultancy, monitoring your discussions to a level of intelligence that can improve your future interactions, whether that is picking the right clientele who is more likely to give a higher ACV, or improving your own processes that help you amplify your SOPs. We've built
Mhm.
some stuff for consultancies actually, and it's it's taken off quite well. Like it's improved their efficiency by 80%. So or the other thing, the other spectrum is SaaS. It's like, what are all the little mini triggers that can be optimized within your intelligence? Because everybody thinks of AI agents today as like these things that go out and perform tasks for you and like, write for you on demand or generate something for you on demand. But like,
Hmm.
there is actually a lot of ability to leverage proper data across any industry that has it, which is every industry, to improve your processes and your growth. And I think AI agents are not used enough within that area, right?
Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, one red flag that tells you a company is not ready for agents yet.
I mean, it depends, but again, nothing wrong with using GPT agents. But a lot of
Hmm.
the time when people say like, "Well, why can't I just do this with GPT?" or but I already build my own custom models in GPT. There's a big one. It's like like it's not like you're not building a custom model when when you're creating a GPT, right? That's not at all it. But they're like, when people say that, truth is, we're like, well, okay, like if you're getting good enough rules for GPT, we're not going to
Hmm.
compete with $200 a month. Sorry, what we do is much more expensive. It's going to be much better. If you're willing to give it a
100%.
shot and work together on it, sure, it's going to be extremely better, but it's not $200 a month. And some people don't even have like the good subscription, right? So then you're competing against $20 a month. So I think that's a big red flag
Hmm.
versus the opposite, which we love, is like, I keep on trying to build my custom models in GPT, but for some reason, all of these, instructions, like it fails. And then we can explain, we're like, look, like this is exactly why, because GPT apps and GPTs, they're great, but for you, it's not going to work because of ABC. I think
Hmm.
that's what we usually try to strive towards. Because reality, if they don't even know GPT, that's another red flag, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Where have you been all this time? Like, it's all over the
yeah,
news now.
if you don't use GPT at all, it's like that spectrum, don't use GPT, or you think GPT is like the cure all. I think it's like probably not the best place for us to collaborate. I'm not saying it's not good for others, but we tend to
Hmm.
see less value in collaboration with those individuals.
100%. Now, what's a tooling or concept that you're most excited about for agent reliability in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough one. There's a lot of different measurements that are happening in place and everything regarding this topic. I think I'm on the lookout. I'm on the lookout with new technologies, not just moving fast, but also hardware
Hmm.
devices that are going to support this. So there's a lot of things, new chips, Google's chips, new quantum, there's a lot of things that could potentially change and like turn the entire market upside down.
Hmm.
Even OpenAI's device, like they're teasing it. I'm curious, like when we get a little bit more in there. I've made my own hypotheses of what could this thing be and so on. But I think I'm almost like thinking not so much software, but hardware, because
Yeah.
software and new approaches, like people call it the GPT moment, but I'm thinking like, what is the next transformer moment?
Hmm.
And transformer, again, for listeners, is the technology behind GPT. That's the T. So I think I'm curious about what is that next transformer moment and all the hardware advancements.
So we're excited to see what's going on. Now, last question. What's one book that you like to recommend? And it could be a personal, fictional book, or it can be like a book around AI. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, to me, by far, Prediction Machines. There's a lot of great books, but I think I'm also biased because, again, Ajay Agrawal, he co-wrote that with Adi Goldfarb, and I've had the pleasure to have the immense pleasure and opportunity to learn from both on a
That's
personal
amazing.
level and being tutored by them and different programs that I was a part of in communities. So
Hmm.
they're incredible people, both of them. I've had more pleasure, learning from Ajay, but I think I would always speak very highly of that book. It's a great balance between getting you to understand the technicalities
Hmm.
and getting you to also draw parallels to the real world. And what's amazing about it is I forget the exact year it was written, but man, it's been a while since it was written. They have an updated version now too. I would say read both, but read the
Hmm.
older one first and then see what they wrote again in the secondary book. And man, it's crazy. It just shows like how far the vision was already back then within their mind. And,
Hmm.
trying to almost read it and think back to that year. And it's like, where was that year? Like, what was the technology at during that year and how the book writes about it and thinking where it is today? I think incredible. Again, it's Prediction Machines. You will find it. It's on
Prediction
Amazon by
machines.
Ajay Agrawal. Super valuable. Their parallel to electricity is a very interesting not parallel that they draw.
Well, thank you for recommending that. And I just added that to my list. It was released April 17th, 2018. So we're
Yeah,
talking 7 years ago. I mean, their predictions,
yeah.
and I mean, that's when it was released. They probably wrote it in 2017, 2016. So it's even, showing predictions from a few hours, from a few years back. So I'm excited to catch this one.
It's an interesting one.
Now, we're done with the questions, so let me just quickly recap for anyone listening. So, Yuri and the team at Jump Point are betting that you don't need a huge head count if you have reliable agents doing real work, not just a simple chatbot bolted onto the side of your stack. We talked about what reliability actually means for agent systems, accuracy, guardrails, evaluation, and how they design from day one so agents don't just look good in a demo, but hold up inside messy legacy enterprise systems. We also dug into their August launch, where agents can simulate an individual's workflow inside the existing tools, which is a different way to solve the classic integration problem. Instead of stitching every system together, you teach an agent to operate like a power user with strong safety rails. Additionally, we pulled lessons from Yuri's years building AI in other industries, from marketing automation to enterprise workflows, and we spoke about how to avoid the usual traps and treat agents as real teammates, not toy projects. So, if you're considering agents in your own company, hopefully this gave you a sharper lens on where to start, how to do it, what to look out for, and a good way to do it in a way that you can actually trust that service. So, Yuri, for anyone listening wants to learn more about Jump Point or talk to you about reliable agent systems, where's the best place to send them? Your website, LinkedIn, or somewhere else?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best place to connect. So it's agnostic. We can chat. It's Yuri Kaplan. You'll see that I'm an AI enthusiast by the thing, and you'll see this face on it. So LinkedIn is probably the best one. Please feel free to connect. And I would love if you just add in your message that you heard about me on this podcast, so I can make sure that I respond as quickly as possible.
I'll make sure to add your LinkedIn and the Jump Point website below so that it's easy to find. And Yuri, we want to thank you for joining the podcast. It was a pretty awesome talk. And we want to thank you for breaking down the real, unsexy work behind making agent systems actually reliable. Now, if you're listening and you're running on spreadsheets, legacy systems, or you've got that one process nobody wants to touch, this episode is your sign that agents can help if you design them properly. For more conversations with founders and operators rebuilding the rails of operations and growth with AI, subscribe to the show and connect with me and Yuri on LinkedIn. We post breakdowns and clips from every episode. Thank you for listening. Yuri, thank you again for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.
Amazing. Thank you, Johan. Thanks everybody for listening.